There are moments in life when you look back and know that you didn't do anything wrong. You chose the right thing over the easy. You lived honestly when others compromised. You prayed when you could have given up. You believed in God, not just in words, but with your whole life. And yet, the sky still falls. One morning, the doctor delivers results you weren't prepared to hear. A brief phone call tells you family is no longer the same. A number in your bank account dwindles, then hits rock bottom, and hope, the thing that lifted you up every day, begins to dry up in silence. Not because you lacked faith, not because you lived wrongly, but because suffering still comes. And in that darkness, when the night seemed longer than any prayer, a question arose from the depths of my soul. If God truly loves me, why did he let this happen? It wasn't the question of a rebel. It was the cry of a believer, but one who was broken. A question not filled with defiance, but with tears. And you are not alone in asking this question. Thousands of years ago, a man stood exactly where you are standing. He was not wicked. He did not turn his back on God. The Bible calls him righteous, upright, God-fearing, and shunned of evil. His name was Job. In the blink of an eye, Job lost everything. His children, his possessions, his health, his honor, and even the understanding of those closest to him. He sat on the ashes of his own life, his body in pain, his soul shattered. There were no immediate answers, no instant miracles, only the heavy silence of heaven. And it was in that silence that Job posed the questions you are carrying in your heart today. Today, we are not just recounting Job's story. We will enter into his pain. We will listen to his lamentations, his unanswered questions, and then we will discover the miracle. Why a man who has lost everything does not lose his faith, and how hope can still survive even when everything else has died. The Bible doesn't introduce Job with an ambiguous or neutral statement. From the very first line, God places a very strong mark on this man. There was a man named Job in the land of Uz. He was blameless and upright, fearing God and shunning evil. Job 1:1. These four phrases, blank, upright, fearing God, shunning evil, are not human praise, but an assessment from the Bible itself. This means Job was not a victim of hidden sin, not a hypocrite living a double life, nor someone being punished by God for some mistake. He is the kind of person many believers aspire to be. Job was not just righteous in the temple, he was righteous in his daily life. He was not just fearing God when things went well, he feared God in every small decision. The Bible goes on to say that Job was incredibly wealthy. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 pairs of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and many servants. And the Bible concludes, this man was greater than all the men in the East. Job 1-3. But Job's wealth did not make him arrogant or distant from God. On the contrary, it was in this abundance that he lived even more cautiously before the Lord. Job had 10 children, 7 sons, and 3 daughters, and his family seemed full of joy. His children often gathered together, eating and drinking in close fellowship. However, what made Job different was not his possessions or children, but the heart of a God-fearing father. The Bible records a very profound detail. When the days of feasting were over, Job called his sons and sanctified them, and in the morning offered burnt sacrifices according to the number of each one. For Job said, perhaps my sons have sinned and blasphemed God in their hearts. Job 1-5. Let's pause here for a moment. Job didn't wait for his children to sin openly. He didn't wait for consequences. He didn't say, they're grown up now, take responsibility for themselves. He interceded for them even if it was only the possibility of sin in their hearts. This shows that Job understood very well that the relationship with God is not just about outward actions, but begins in the heart, and he lived with a deep, enduring, and holy reverence every day. Therefore, The Bible emphasizes Job always did this. Job 1-5. Not just once, not on a whim, but a way of life. If anyone deserves protection, it is Job. If anyone we think God will protect from suffering, it is him. And this is what makes Job's story so profoundly painful. Because when someone who lives wrongly suffers misfortune, we can find reasons. But when a righteous, God-fearing, upright person has everything taken away, our entire system of thinking collapses. Job's story doesn't just question suffering. It questions faith, whether we believe in God for what he gives or because he is God. And from here, Job's most painful journey has only just begun. The attack from heaven. The Bible reveals a shocking truth, a truth that Job, who was suffering on earth, was completely unaware of. While Job lived righteously, offered sacrifices, and feared God daily, a serious dialogue was taking place in heaven. The Bible says, "And one day the sons of God came to appear before the Lord. Satan also came among them." Job 1-6. Let's stop here. Satan did not appear as a disorganized figure. He came to appear. This shows that he did not act outside God's sovereignty. He was not omnipotent. He did not destroy at will. And then God posed a question that drew the attention of all heaven. "Have you noticed my servant Job? For there is no one like him on earth, blameless and upright, fearing God and shunning evil." Job 1-8. This wasn't Satan discovering Job. God himself named Job. Job was God's joy. He was living proof that a person could truly love and revere God in a fallen world. And that's what Satan couldn't bear. He responded with a bitter accusation. Did Job fear God in vain? Job 1-9. In other words, Satan was saying, Job's faith is not genuine. He only loves him because he blesses him. He is only faithful because life is so good. Then Satan continued his accusation. Did not you put a hedge around him, his house, and all that he owned? You blessed the work of his hands, and his livestock spread throughout the land. Job 1:10. Satan did not deny Job's righteousness. He doubted Job's motives, and then he challenged him directly. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Job 1:11. This was a moment of extreme seriousness. The question was not just, was Job faithful? But, can a man love God simply because he is God or not? God allowed the test, not because he doubted Job, but because he knew true faith needed to be demonstrated. The Bible says, the Lord said to Satan, Behold, all that he has is in your hand, but do not lay your hand on him. Job 1:12. There are limits. There is control. No suffering is beyond God's sovereignty. And then, on earth, the storm began. In a single day, giving Job no time to prepare, to understand, or to recover, everything collapsed in succession. His livestock were stolen. His servants were killed by the sword. Fire from heaven consumed his flock. A great wind blew down his house, burying all his children under the rubble. One bad news followed another. Before one messenger had finished speaking, another had already arrived. The Bible does not sugarcoat the pain. It was total destruction. What was Job's reaction? Then Job arose, tore his clothes, shaved his head, and fell on the ground to worship. Job 1:20. Note, Job tore his clothes, a sign of mourning. He shaved his head, an expression of deep grief. He fell on the ground not to complain, but to worship. Then he uttered words that have echoed throughout thousands of years of faith history. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Praise be to the name of the Lord. Job 1:21. These are not the words of someone without pain. These are not the words of someone insensitive. These are the words of someone broken, yet still choosing to trust. A person who doesn't understand what's happening in heaven but still believes that God is worthy of worship, even when all blessings have vanished. And the Bible concludes with a short but powerful sentence. In all this, Job did not sin, nor did he say anything offensive to God. Job 1:22. The attack from heaven did not destroy Job's faith. It revealed that faith, and from here, the story is no longer just about Job, but about ourselves, standing in the midst of suffering yet still having to decide what we believe in God for, and to what extent. When the suffering doesn't stop, if Job's story ended after the first day of loss, perhaps many of us would breathe a sigh of relief. At least he survived. At least he was still healthy. At least the suffering could have stopped there. But the Bible says, no, because there are trials that don't just touch what we have, but touch us directly. In heaven, Satan returns. This time, he no longer targets possessions or children. He targets Job's body and soul, skin for skin. A man will give all he has for his life. Job 2-4. Satan says, in other words, Job is still faithful because he hasn't truly suffered yet. Touch his body and he will fall. God allowed it again, but still set limits. Behold, he is in your hand, but you must preserve his life. Job 2-6. And then the pain reached its deepest point. The Bible describes it briefly, but hauntingly. So Satan went out from before the Lord and beat Job with a scab from his feet to the top of his head. Job 2-7. It wasn't just illness. It was constant pain. It was a body bleeding, festering, itching, and without sleep. It was the humiliation of a man once respected, now unable to sit among the community. Job could no longer sit in his house. He was driven outside to sit in the ashes, where people threw garbage and corpses. Job took a piece of pottery to scrape himself and sat in the ashes. Job 2-8. Imagine this. A man who was once a wealthy Eastern man, now without medicine, without a bed, only a broken piece of pottery to scrape the sores on his body. But the greatest pain did not come from the body. It came from the person closest to him. His wife said to him, "Are you still in good shape? Curse God and die." Job 2-9. These are not the words of a wicked man. These are the words of a man who has lost all his children, a wife watching her husband suffer day by day and unable to bear it any longer. But precisely because of this, those words hurt even more. When you are suffering, you can withstand attacks from enemies. But when your closest relative tells you, "Abandon the Lord," that is where many people fall. This is the moment when the faith of many people crumbles, not because they hate God, but because they are too tired to continue believing. But Job answered not with anger, not with insults, but with a profound truth. "You speak like a foolish woman. We receive blessings from God. Why not also receive calamities?" Job 2:10. Job didn't say calamity was good. He didn't deny pain. He didn't pretend to be strong. But he understood one thing. God is not just the God of good days. If he is worthy of worship when he bestows blessings, then he is also worthy of trust when he allows suffering. The Bible concludes with a quiet but profoundly significant statement. In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Job 2:10. Remember this. True faith is not something that exists only when things are going well. True faith is not a song sung when the heart is joyful. True faith is revealed when there is nothing left to cling to except God himself. And from here, Job's pain is no longer physical, but a battle in his soul. Number where the biggest question begins to resound. Why? Menders say. The battle in the soul. When the question why has no answer after illness strikes, after the harshest words come from the closest person, the Bible doesn't show us an immediate miracle. No angel appears, no voice from heaven, no healing, only time. And time, when we suffer, is often the most ruthless enemy. Job's 3 friends came to visit him: Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. When they saw Job from afar, the Bible records, they did not recognize him. They wept, tore their clothes, and threw dust on their heads. Job 2:12. They wept with Job. They sat with Job. They sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was. Job 2:13. This was perhaps their best moment, because sometimes the most loving thing isn't an explanation but a silent presence. But then they began to speak, and as they spoke, Job's suffering didn't lessen, it increased. They believed the world operated on a simple formula: good people are blessed, bad people suffer. So, according to their logic, if Job was suffering like this, he must have sinned. They didn't speak immediately. They spoke gradually. They spoke in words that sounded moral, reasonable, even very biblical. But they were wrong. Job listened, and then, for the first time, he opened his mouth. Then Job opened his mouth and cursed the day he was born. Job 3:1. Understand this correctly. Job did not curse God. He cursed the day he was born. He wished he had never existed. He wished he had never seen the light. Why did I not die in my mother's womb? Why did I not breathe my last when I came out of the womb? Job 3:11. These are not the words of a rebel. These are the cries of a weary soul. And the shocking thing is, the Bible does not condemn Job for these words. Job asked questions. Job wept. Job argued with God. He said, I called upon you, but you did not answer. I stood there, but you looked at me. Job 30-20. He did not understand. He saw no meaning. He saw no justice. But there was one thing Job never did. He didn't pretend he was okay, and he didn't turn his back on God. Job didn't talk about God to others. He spoke to God. That is mature faith. Immature faith says, I believe in God when he makes things easy. Mature faith says, I don't understand him, but I still talk to him. 2K. And then, amidst the tearful chapters, amidst the tense arguments, Job uttered a declaration that shook the history of faith. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and that at the end he will stand on the earth. Job 19:25. Wait a minute. Job said this before he was healed, while his children were still dying, while his body was still in pain, while the answer had not yet come. He didn't say, I will believe if. He said, I know. Job's faith wasn't based on circumstances. It was based on the nature of God. And then when Job had said all he could, when his friends had exhausted their arguments, when humanity had nothing more to add, God spoke, not to explain in detail, not to answer every why. God asked Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Job 38-4. That question wasn't meant to humiliate Job. It was meant to broaden his perspective. God didn't say, Job, this is why you suffer. He said, Job, do you believe in me even when you don't understand me? And Job responded with the deepest humility. Before, my ears only heard rumors about you, but now my eyes have seen you. Job 42-5. Finally, God restored Job, doubled his possessions, a new family, a new life. But remember this. The greatest gift Job received wasn't restoration, but a deeper understanding of God. And here's a message for you, if you're suffering today. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to be vulnerable. But don't stray from God, because there are things you can only see from the darkness. God speaks after long, sleepless nights, after countless unanswered questions. Finally, God speaks. But what is astonishing is, he does not begin with an explanation. He does not justify himself. He does not say, "This is why you must suffer." The Bible says, "Then the Lord spoke to Job from the whirlwind." Job 38:1. God does not come in gentleness first. He comes in power, not to threaten, but to awaken. And the first question he asks is not directed at Job's sin, not at his ignorance, but at man's place before the universe. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Speak, if you have understanding. Job 38:4. This is not a reproach. This is an invitation to look beyond personal suffering. God leads Job through the vastness of creation. Who measures the heavens? Who commands the dawn? Who keeps the sea within its boundaries? Who cares for the lions, ravens, mountain goats, and wild donkeys? Each question is a door opening. This world is not chaotic. It is governed by a being of great wisdom, even if humans do not understand. The important thing is, God did not say that Job deserved to suffer. Neither did he confirm Job's friends' arguments. He did only one thing. He revealed himself. And that was enough. In that presence, Job no longer argued, no longer defended himself, no longer demanded answers. He said, "I am so small. How can I answer you? I cover my mouth with my hand." Job 40:4. Then finally, Job uttered the most profound declaration of the whole story. "I have only heard about you, but now my eyes have seen you." Job 42:5. Understand this correctly. Job did not receive all the answers, but he received the one he was asking about, and that was the turning point, because there are pains that cannot be healed by explanation. They are healed only by the presence of God. Job realized a profound truth. He did not need to understand everything God did. He only needed to know who God was. And when you truly encounter him, when you not just hear about him, but see him, even unanswered questions no longer have the power to destroy your faith, because God is still there. After God spoke, the story didn't end in ashes. It ended in restoration. The Bible says, "The Lord restored Job when he prayed for his friends. The Lord gave Job double what he had." Job 42:10. Job received his possessions back. He had new children. His life was extended in peace. But if we think this is the greatest reward, then we miss the most important part of the story. The most valuable thing Job received wasn't the doubled wealth. It was a deeper relationship with God. Before, Job feared God because he knew God was righteous. But now, Job knew God was with him in his suffering. Before, Job's faith was strong. But now, that faith has matured. Suffering did not cause Job to lose God. Suffering brought Job closer to God, and that is the message for you today. Job's story doesn't promise that. The righteous will not suffer. Believers will always be protected from tears. But it affirms something even stronger. Suffering doesn't mean God has abandoned you. Silence doesn't mean he's absent. Trial isn't the end, it can be a comma. If today you are in darkness, if you have prayed but haven't seen an answer, if you are so tired you can barely breathe, please remember, Job was there too. And the same God who held Job in the ashes, who listened to his lamentations, who did not abandon him in silence, is still holding on to your life. You may not yet see the light, but the light has never left you. Hold on to hope, not because things will get easier, but because God is faithful. And if he completed Job's story, he has never left yours unfinished.